In Crimea today, they cheered the anniversary of their annexation by Russia. But here in Yalta, a city known for World War II heroes, they marched under the banner of an alleged war criminal. Vladimir Putin is a wanted man. Today, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for the alleged crime of abducting children from Ukraine.
It is forbidden by international law for occupied powers to transfer civilians from the territory they live in to other territories. Children enjoy special protection under the Geneva Convention.
Putin isn't alone in his international infamy. Here he is discussing the arrival of thousands of Ukrainian orphans with Maria Lvova-Belova, his commissioner for children's rights. She herself claimed to adopt a child from Mariupol. Now she's wanted for alleged child abduction. A UN report this week claims both she and Putin have been behind the forced deportation of around 16,000 Ukrainian children to Russian-controlled areas.
So when Russia occupies a territory, it takes the whole families together with children into the territory of Russia. Parents might be put into the filtration camp, and they are so the child is being taken out of the family and then put into some kind of institution or a foster family.
And the UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine also detailed other alleged war crimes, such as attacks on hospitals, widespread torture and rape. For the government in Kyiv, today could be just the beginning. They hope for justice too for the more than 400 bodies found in the graves of Bucha, or for the bombing and siege of Mariupol last May. Will Putin be held responsible for these?
Well, I suspect for many victims, whatever any international court does will not ease or assuage their pain. And of course, many will have lost their lives. But what I think it does show is that we will not accept, as an international community, impunity. We will not accept impunity for the worst crimes against civilians in a time of war.
Moscow said the warrant was both outrageous and unacceptable. Russia doesn't just deny the accusations, it doesn't even recognize the ICC. So business as usual for Putin today, a man who doesn't even recognize the word war. And so he discussed his so-called special operation with officials in Crimea. From the comfort of his long table, he knows the long arm of the law may not reach him. The ICC cannot arrest suspects, and Putin would only stand trial if he traveled to a nation part of the ICC's jurisdiction.
This means that from this moment until his arrest, the President of Russia, as the head of a terrorist state, will be afraid to travel outside of Russia because of the possibility that he will be extradited to an international criminal court. This means that every politician who considers himself civilized and looks to the future should think twice before dealing with the Russian leader or his supporters, and before shaking hands or sitting at the negotiating table with them.
The ICC said it made its announcement today so as to try to prevent further war crimes. But what chance of that when Russia is entrenched in its self-made quagmire of eastern Ukraine? The bloody Battle of Bakhmut has been at a stalemate for months, with Poland and Slovakia today pledging fighter jets to continue Ukraine's defence. The idea of Putin standing trial feels as distant as peace itself.
Well, the Ukrainian government has set up an international legal task force to help get justice for victims of war crimes committed by Russia. The eminent human rights barrister, Baroness Helena Kennedy, is on the panel and joins us now. What is the point of an arrest warrant from a court Russia doesn't recognise?
Well, one of the things that I think has determined this warrant being issued now, and the two warrants, is because there's a hope that by drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children, will stop it. In some way, it will alert people inside Ukraine to the way in which children are being taken and disappearing into Russia. And it's to also give a warning about how serious this kind of crime is taken by the International Criminal Court. The evidence of this, Christian, has been coming through since last year. And we've been aware of it. We've held a number of meetings, in fact, in Parliament. Alf Dubs hosted one of them because he's a great person on children in war. And so this is an issue that we've been very aware of, and there's been the gathering of evidence about. And the institute that I run at the International Bar Association has been involved in taking evidence and has been out to Poland and been out to Lviv and we've met with people and we've given that evidence to the UN. But all I can say is that the reason for putting out these warrants now is to seek to alert attention, both in Russia and in Ukraine, to what is happening with children. I mean,
Well, just on the children, I mean, do people know their identities? I mean, because Russia says, you know, it's taking orphans, it's helping its own children, effectively.
Yes. I mean, it's being presented in Russia as being a humanitarian operation, that they're bringing children into safety. I mean, I know about the children, a whole set of children from Mariupol. The bombardment of Mariupol, everyone will remember, was absolutely horrifying. People were underground and in hiding, and they basically bombed it into submission, and many, many people were killed, and we don't yet know the exact numbers. But children in some serious numbers were taken from there, and they were transported into Russia. Now, as you've heard, those children have been taken into children's homes, they've been taken to orphanages, they've been put with foster families. But we do know that in recent times, Russia has softened up its own adoption laws to make adoption much more easy. And of course, have these children got identification papers and so forth? And what does this do in demoralizing the Ukrainian people, the grandparents of those children, the father who's at the front line, hearing that his child has disappeared to somewhere? And so it's one of the crimes that's actually mentioned specifically in the Rome Statute that created the International Criminal Court, that the taking of children in war, which there's some history of, is one of the great crimes.
I mean, in terms of its moral standing, given the biggest nations in the world, the United States, India, China, none of them sign up to the ICC either.
But you do have over 120, I think it's 129 countries have signed up. And it means that there's a limitation on the travel that Mr. Putin is going to be able to do for the rest of his life, because those warrants exist for the rest of his days.
So he can be arrested if he turns up somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, he'll be very cautious about where he goes. But the woman who is the commissioner for children's rights, and who works in the presidential office, and so he knows that this has been going on. She has been on a sanctions list, certainly by the United Kingdom. We put her on a sanctions list a couple of months ago because of the evidence that was coming to light about her role in all of this. And so this is not something that's been happening by accident. It's actually a considered part of the policy of war. And of course, we're not allowed to call it war. I mean, we also know of the people the journalists, the lawyers who have been arrested for referring to what's happening as war.
I mean, there's a long list of people who've been, for whom there are arrest warrants, with whom justice has not caught up yet. Do you think, in your heart, Putin will ever face a court?
It is worth remembering that quite a long time after, in the Balkans, years passed before certain people were caught up with and were then put before the court and convicted. Charles Taylor is in a jail here in Britain, having been involved in atrocity crimes in Africa. And so, the point about this is there's no time limit on it. But the wheels of justice on the International Criminal Court move slowly. Already the Ukrainians are trying people, for example, those who've killed civilians, and they've put Russian soldiers on trial. And we in Britain have been involved in the training of judges in war crimes and how to conduct war crimes trials. And we're seeking to do the same sort of thing at the International Bar Association for lawyers, training them up to make sure that the Russians also are properly defended. It's important that people have due process.
Helena Kennedy, thank you very much indeed. Jackie.